this pitch deck, and this is not the full menu of the things that you can find as outputs of this project, but just a taste of 4 of these flagships outputs that you're gonna see today. And afterwards, of course, we are very looking forward to your reactions, to your questions and thoughts. So we have prepared a long Q&A, so then we have time to address all those questions. And some rules before we start. So we have some these housekeeping rules about the session. So it's going to be recorded. And now I think it's already recording, I think, Jacob? Yes, perfect. So then we also want to highly encourage to be active, but also to mind the space that you take. So then everyone is allowed to share. And then we have prepared this Q&A section on Microsoft Teams and also a Menti. So you can add your thoughts to either the speakers or also to the audience. And afterwards, all the recording and the slides will be available after the session on the website cintran.eu. And this is the hosting team today. So myself, Franco Crudi, I'm working at IGLO Europe together with my colleagues Jacob Bruem and Karsten Rothweiler, who is going to help me moderating all the sessions. And before we go into the main insights, I want you to remind you why we are here. So this is the Carbon Intensive Regions in Transition project, which has pulled a team together of research partners, but also practitioners in these 4 regions, which were trying to unravel the challenges of this big structural change, which is trying to decarbonize the regions that are highly dependent on fossil fuel extraction. Not only within these 4 regions, but also all the research was expanded towards Europe in a way. And what we look at specifically was the pace of transformation, the capacity to cope, and how these communities adapt to all the decarbonization policies that were implemented in the EU. And after that, of course, all the insights, outputs, and publications, it's in this website. So if you want to dive into it, please go ahead and join us in the CINTRAN.eu website. There you will find findings, tools, and also more than 215 publications. And I think there are more coming, of course, because this is the end of the project, and this is where also all the outputs come up. And last but not least, I wanted also to show that, as I said, this is the 10th webinar as part of the capacity building program led by ICLE Europe. We have hosted 9 before, so you can already go into the website on the event section, or after you receive these slides, you're going to be able to click on each of them and check all the topics, because we not only brought the research outputs from that were happening in the project at that time, but also we tried to cooperate with the regional practitioners that were implementing the energy transition in the regions. So I think that's it from our side. And now I'm going to give the floor to our flagship project coordinator, let's say, Lucas Renville from Wuppertal Institute. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Franco. I've never been called a flagship before, but I'm happy to take that as a compliment. Yeah, so maybe we start directly. The CINTRAN project is coming to an end at this month, and it's been a 4-year journey. And if you count in the time in which we prepared the proposal, it's been 4.5, 5 years now, and a lot has happened in that time. So it's impossible for me to do justice to the entire project, but I will give you a few of my key learnings and point you to a few research outputs, specifically those that are not later also presented in the pitches, to give you kind of an overview. You already know in which regions we operated, so we can skip this slide perhaps and start right away. I think one of the key questions that we've been grappling is what is a just transition? And it turned out very quickly that just transition is really hard to grasp. It's almost impossible to define in a positive way. People have not a concrete vision of what a successful just transition is, what it looks like. We know that the concept of justice is always aspirational. It's always work in progress. You're never there. And there's also no benchmark for success, right? What level of economic prosperity is enough to call it a successful just transition? How do you define it? But what we quickly learned is that it's much easier to talk with people in the regions, with experts, if you focus on injustices, because people have very clear ideas what they experience as unjust and what they anticipate as injustices coming on. Next slide, please. So in that sense, for us, a successful just transition remedies existing injustices and minimizes and avoids new injustices. This is kind of my working definition. It's pretty much off of what others have defined it, but I think it has been proven in our project as workable, as actually helping to engage with stakeholders and practitioners and we had these wonderful transition academies where we engaged very deeply, very inspiring exchanges with a lot of people. I guess some of you might be actually here listening in. Next slide, please. So one thing that we really learned is that there is an illusion of prosperity that's dominating. It's a lot of people have the idea that the coal regions were prospering regions before we started to talk about decarbonization and phase out of coal or oil shale in Estonia. Well, it's easy to understand why, because they are the largest employer, the mining companies. They contribute very strongly to the regional GDP. They're often the only relevant traded industry that's actually exporting from the region. But it's also wrong to assume that those regions would be economic deserts without the coal or carbon-intensive industry. Next slide, please. And in our reality, we saw that actually many, if not most, of the regions of the coal regions are actually falling behind in several indicators. So colleagues from E3 modeling developed this socioeconomic risk index in which they assessed hazard, exposure, and vulnerability of regions, where hazard and exposure more or less relate to kind of the changes that are imminent, right? So how much coal does the region have right now? How much change of domestic production is anticipated in the region? But what we found here is that actually the vulnerability, which looks at the current unemployment rate, basically before the transition even started, the GDP per capita, this is the factors that are kind of legacy of the coal industry and carbon intensive industry. Those are the ones that are actually dominating the risk perception. And many of the regions are not at all are prospering even before the transition started. Next slide, please. So they have suboptimal infrastructure. The infrastructure has been built to support carbon-intensive industries. I think one striking example was from Silesia, where there have been public transport tram lines built between the city centers and the industrial sites. What was happening now is that we have this a lot of people move out of the city centers because they're not very pleasant to live in and move to the suburbs. And at the same time, the industrial plants are closing down, don't need that much people anymore. So you end up with tram lines that are basically not fit for purpose anymore. And we have similar examples in all the other regions. We see that the regions have very poor reputation. We done a colleagues from Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies, they have conducted an econometric analysis of migration patterns, and they found that even if you control for employment and GDP growth, we are seeing higher percentage of outmigration in carbon-intensive regions, and it's particularly pronounced at the higher educated people. So there must be something about a bad reputation, bad image that makes it much more easily difficult for those regions to attract investment and attract and keep talent. And we also saw gender imbalances. Historically, the shift work and very well-paid work in the mines, have supported, I don't know if that's the right word, but incentivized kind of traditional family lifestyles with stay-at-home moms and sole breadwinner dads. We've seen that women particularly are often excluded from decision-making process. Even the EU Commission in its own reports, when we asked about gender dimension, they said, well, it's mostly jobs, mostly men working in the industry, so it's not really a women issue. Our research really makes it clear that we have to disagree with that, especially if we want to advance well-being in the regions. It's crucial to look into the social infrastructure, the social fabric, and also the gender aspects. We've just published a new policy paper on a gender-just transition policy. So if you want to delve more into that, I highly recommend it. Next slide, please. The good news is that we also saw that the Just Transition framework works. So this is a figure from a report that's going to be published today, in which the colleagues from E3 modeling models the effects of the Fit for 55 package in the net zero example, and then also modeled what the just transition mechanism may help to contribute to alleviate some of the problems. And they found some interesting insights, for example, that investments in renewable energy and alternative fuels are less effective to help the regions because a lot of that is, a lot of the money is going into imported content and not into value creation in the regions. Overall, they find that every dollar spent for the just transition mechanism creates $1.4 of revenue in cent. So there's a multiplier factor. And the benefits are highest in Greece, Czech Republic, and Romania. That's in part because also there the just transition funding coming in is relatively high compared to the regional GDP, but also because they apparently spend it on more effective categories of spending. Next slide, please. Yeah, I personally delved into the questions of narratives. So what are people talking about when they talk about just transition? What do they mean? Which narratives characterize political discourse, and which injustices are being invoked by regional stakeholders? And do we have patterns and similarities in this work? Next slide. And what we found is that we have these kind of hopeful narratives in all regions that basically state that this just transition process is an opportunity to reinvent the regions, to change them for the better. And obviously they are more broadly shared in regions that have already progressed more, like in Greece and in Germany, where we have binding decisions to fade out coal. These narratives are more broadly shared, but they are also kind of the nucleus, the catalyst for change in the other regions, in Ida-Viruma, in Estonia, and Silesia, and Poland. That was kind of a watershed moment, and that's also what we heard from a lot of stakeholders, that they are really, like, in the moment they had a final decision, they started to reinvest or redirect their resources from resistance towards adapting. And this is, I think, very encouraging to see. Obviously, the pace of the transformation is a challenge. So Greece has an extraordinary fast phase-out plan, which I think a lot of people in the region really fear is too fast. It's breakneck speed. But on the other hand, Germany, for example, most commentators went in the other direction and saying it's not fast enough. Not very surprising, I must say, but yeah. And what I found particularly interesting is that we found in all regions that a major concern in terms of injustice is who gets to benefit from the opportunities created in the just transition frame. So who is it only going to workers or companies, miners and companies, or is it spent more broadly? And a lot of the resistance that we've been observing, Mary Claire can talk about this later on, is actually corresponding to people who have been disadvantaged previously and are now fearing to be left out once again. So this question of how to allocate the opportunities of the just transition needs much more attention, I think, in the future. Next slide, please. We also found that workers are not passive victims. We've talked a lot to miners, and they all have their plan Bs. We need to avoid idealizing them or seeing them only as a group. They have agency, and basically their plan Bs are suffering from the same structural injustices and structural inequalities that everyone else in the regions also experience. So I think there's a plea for us to unbreak this homogeneous group of workers, because they are individuals, they're part of their communities, they're providers for their families, they are actors in their own right. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. Somehow this I had a new version of this slide, but anyway, it didn't refresh properly. No worries. The idea I think that we came up with now and are still working on at the moment and finalizing is that when we look into, we really want to get to the bottom of just transition, we need to systematically understand the injustices, and there we have the legacy injustices that were created by the fossil fuel system and the economic structure of that time. Yeah, thanks. And then on top of that, we have the new injustices coming from the change process itself, like job loss, economic decline. Some people feel less loss of identity. They have lack of access to just transition funds. And the hotspots of just transition, the compounding injustices are where we need to look most. This is where the problems are. And if we don't address those hotspots and intersections of injustices, then we don't have a chance of actually achieving a genuine just transition. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I think this injustice perspective would help us to identify new coalitions. Also, it's very often that the people who have been relatively privileged and are fighting to keep those privileges are not the ones driving change, but really finding out the marginalized groups helps you to build new alliances and break resistance. It helps us to be more systematic about identifying the key issues, and I think looking forward, what we need in Europe in the next phase is a proper evaluation framework for this just transition mechanism. So far, we're only looking into how much money has been spent, how much investment has attracted, how many jobs have been created, but no one is really looking into, did we improve on justice issues? And I think having this injustice framework and looking at these intersections could be a starting point to develop such a framework to study, to first map the injustice that we are experiencing today, and then continuously monitor whether we do better and improve on those. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, this was a wonderful team of partners. Thanks to everyone who was involved. I really enjoyed it. And I'm sad that this will end by the end of this month, but thanks to everyone who contributed, and I hope I did your results justice in my keynote. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Lucas. Also, I think I would like to highlight again this question, like, did we improve in justice issues, and also to try to somehow like map them and monitor them, and also like what you highlighted, like even though like at an initial point of view we thought that these regions were like the champions in a way, because usually they are the ones that contribute most of the GDP in globally in a way, but at the same time they have so much that only indicator doesn't show, like this infrastructure, and also like the bad image that they need to fight against, so then they can keep their population, and also of course like the traditional ways of living into those regions. And I'm sure that everyone is already having many thoughts and questions. So I will highly invite and encourage everyone to join the Menti. Either you can use your phone or like click on the link that is going to be sent in the chat, or go into menti.com and use that code. But before we go into the pitches and also into these questions that you have, I would like to introduce our representative of the European Parliament, Matthias Hecke. Thank you for joining us. So he is member of the Social Democratic Party of Germany for the region of Saxony, and he's active within the Committee on Regional Development and the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy. And I think one of the the biggest things that CINTRAN did was like trying to connect the research into policy making. So I think we are very curious to know what is it that you think about, like all the insights that you have heard before, and also how all these insights and the flagships that we are going to show afterwards. Of course, you can react after that, but how this could fit into EU policy making. So Matthias, if you are there, you can admit yourself, and we are
I
going to
can.
spotlight you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Franco. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation. It's really a very, very interesting project, and it's an interesting like resource also on of knowledge for us as lawmakers and for the like community also that discusses these issues here in Brussels and in Strasbourg, where I'm in the moment. So this was very insightful to me, and I think I will look it up more deeply afterwards because I think we pointed out to like probably the key problem that a just transition is. It's easy to speak about it, but it's not easy to define it, and especially people affected by these developments do not have a very clear idea. How should they? I mean, even those people that design the policy sometimes don't have a clear idea what their success looks like. So I really agree with the findings you have that it has a socio-economic dimension, but it also has a dimension in terms of meaning, what people contribute. I mean, especially when you think about like mining, people often were very they had a high reputation in their societies when they contributed to the energy to heat. The people felt like in the winter it was warm because they were mining lignite, for example. So my region that I'm from, Saxony, is also part of the lignite phasing out regions in Germany. It's in the eastern part of Germany. I think it was not in the focus of your project, but there are some similarities, I think. And it's also a region it's also a just transition region territory, technically speaking. And what is interesting, probably in our case, is that we have the European component, the Just Transition Mechanism, the Just Transition Fund, and we have a very strong like national component of the German coal phasing out compromise and the plan that is connected to it, which goes mostly into like funding public infrastructure, which is fine, but which also not necessarily well helps us with all the problems we have in terms of value added, in terms of jobs. And what my experience was when talking to the people in the regions is that they feel there's a lot of money for their regions, but it does not really reach them. So it's a bit of paradox, because people from other regions that are also a bit like left behind, or a bit that have to struggle be on the average income level, they say, well, there's so much money spent for that region, but not for us. And so you should suppose everyone is happy in the coal phasing out regions and the transition regions, but it's not the case, obviously, for reasons that you had that you outlined very detailed. So I think that it really, when we monitor just transition mechanism on European level, and we want to develop it further, I think we need to be clearer on the indicators of success, both on economic terms and also on terms of what does it mean for the quality of life for people there. I totally agree that you should not get into this narrative on like backwardsness. I mean, it's even um, it's sometimes that people living in coal mining regions have been labeled like that they they are responsible for the part of the climate change, and that they like personally or as a region are stubborn or backwards, and it's a very difficult discourse, and it does not help. I think it's a question of narrative, but as a lawmaker, of course, it's also a question of policies. What we are trying to do now in the European Parliament is a bit to broaden the scope of the Just Transition Fund, because of course coal mining phase or like mining phase out is an important issue in energy intensive industries, but we also have other regions that are dependent on specific heavy industries that are not covered in the moment by the Just Transition Fund, and that, in my point of view and the point of view of some colleagues, will also undergo a certain transition that needs to be cushioned and needs to be supported with European resources. Because on a European level, we always have a bit of a contradiction that on the one hand we make the rule setting that is essential for the transition, especially like climate laws and all the sectoral legislation that is really much affecting regions, but we do not have the means or hardly have the means to compensate for the unintended distributional outcomes of these policies. So we quite often demand nation states like our member states to do the the cleanup work in a way, saying, yeah, okay, this will probably be harmful for some regions, but of course member states should concentrate their efforts on these regions and blah blah blah. And this sometimes helps with some member states that have the fiscal capabilities or have the resources or also administrative capacities, which is an important issue in that respect, but it does not help with others. So I think that we need to have a stronger European level in that respect, in order not to create more disparities within the internal market, more disparities within the European Union. So this is a struggle that we have to fight during the next MFF negotiations. I think it's a struggle about European Union's role, European Union's budget, and it is something that we should not underestimate, because I think it's very important. And the other question I think is about participation. This is also something that I have been that has been addressed quite often from actors in the regions, that they really feel there is resources, but they feel that their resources are distributed in a way that they have trouble to understand, or they do not feel being part of. So it's something like they quite often feel this is hijacked. Yeah, there's a lot of money hijacked by some actors, and this is, to be honest, it's not completely a completely delusional idea, because of course they sometimes try to redirect resources into projects that yeah, they would have financed anyway. So especially if you talk about public infrastructure, yeah, you have renovation of church buildings, you have childcare facilities, which is all very important. Well, some is more than others, but it's not necessarily a step to counter the problems that these regions face. So people in the regions perceive they are treated like they get a lot of money for their sacrifice, but they actually, on the other hand, don't see the money coming where it's mostly needed in their perspective. So I think that we should improve participation, and we should not surrender to these tendencies of centralization that we discuss nowadays in the European Union. So if you follow the debate about cohesion policy, you see that there are strong proponents of a more centralized like RRF style cohesion policy, so where you have the money and Brussels gives the money to the member states, to the capitals, and it is allocated according to milestones and reforms and so on. Some people here in Brussels really like the idea, and I think that it's not helpful for cohesion purposes and for just transition purposes, because it takes the people and the regions affected out of the driving seat, and they feel much more dominated from the central government, which I think they shouldn't. So my point of view is we need enough resources, we need good participation, and we need a clear target, and we should not it should not overlap with other resources. Last thought about this. I, I have to leave this seminar a bit earlier because I just go to the plenary now because we discuss the Net Zero Industry Act, which is what a coincidence is a bit linked also to the problems that we discuss here. You rightfully said that investment in clean energy as such is not so much of a good tool if you talk about clean energy, like in rollout installations, I guess. I mean, if you have clean tech production in the regions, this is, I think, very helpful because it's a clear, these are energy regions. Yeah, they have the infrastructure, they have the knowledge, they have skill set of workers there. So I think this is something very encouraging if we have if we keep industrial regions their industrial heritage, but we shift from like brown to green tech in a way. This is something that works very well economically and also narrative wise, but it's difficult. So if you see like the European solar panel manufacturing industry in the moment, they struggle hard even to survive the competition with Chinese, especially with Chinese imports and with the US and the attraction of the IRA. So this is something that we also do in the European Parliament and the European Union to support our industry in the specific sectors to be able to compete with foreign competitors. And this is also something that I think is essential for regions in transition because they have the best preconditions to be successful in that. Thank you.
Great, Matthias, thank you very much. If you need to run, give me an indication. Otherwise, I would ask a follow-up question. One question might be possible. Yeah. Wonderful. So I think what Lucas has also here highlighted in a summary was the successful Just Transition is measured and is remedied by existing injustices and avoiding new injustices to come. You just referred to broadening the Just Transition mechanism towards new elements. You talked about concentrated infrastructure investment who may not get down to the local level equally. So what would you recommend to change for the new parliaments, your colleagues in the next period to come? What are key recommendations that you personally, from your experience and maybe also based on what you just heard, would recommend to others? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would recommend that we discuss and reform the indicators that we allocate the money from cohesion policy, and because we also have to see what kind of regional effects do our climate mitigation policies have. I mean, we know how climate change affects specific specific regions, but we also know that climate mitigation and climate protection policies have a certain impact, and it makes a difference if you have like a tourist region in the Mediterranean that has the same absolute GDP per capita than like transition regions in Silesia or so. And nowadays we focus more on GDP as such, but I think that we have to do more of an let's say ex ante cohesion strategy to see where will those regions head to, which structural changes they will face in the future, like in the immediate future of the coming years, which you can already anticipate, and we have to distribute resources accordingly. I think this is quite important because it's not only about rebalancing the loss of income, it's also about creating new opportunities for the people in the regions. It's not just like some people think that just transition means people lose their jobs and you give them money for that. But I mean, that's obviously like economically and also from a sociological perspective, it's nonsense because we really need to create new opportunities and make people actors in the transition, because a lot of people are proud of being part of that bigger story. And I think that we have to we have to allocate resources accordingly, which means that we have to create, we have to allocate more resources also to this policy field, by creating more resources for the European Union in general, or by taking it from other from other items in the budget. So this will be the struggle. I mean, I'm not naive. I mean, other people have different ideas about that, but this is something I think that we should really make the European cohesion funds, make them a really powerful just transition tool.
Great, thank you so much.
But now I really have to
Matthias.
run. I'm very sorry.
Indeed, thank you, and thank you also for following further our insights. So good luck
very
for
much.
your
This is very
presentation.
helpful for my work, and good luck with your seminar and with your further work. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Over to you, Franco.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Carsten. But anyway, I'm happy that we could contribute at least to the discussion of the Net Zero Industry Act. So at least he's going to bring all this, some of the CINTRAN insights that Lucas just showed. But now, as promised, we have some pitch deck. So this is a reminder to the speakers that they have 3 to 5 minutes to tell the pitches about the main insights that they want to present. So we have like this team of 4 people that will present, all of them from CINTRAN partners. So we have today with us, and welcome all of you, Marie-Claire Brivois from the Sussex University Energy Group, and also the Cora Director and Senior Lecturer in the same university, and Janice Beutel from Wuppertal Institute, a researcher from the Future Energy and Industrial Systems team, Lola Nake from Chalmers University of Technology, a doctoral student from the Physical Resource and Theory Division, and also my colleague George Stiff from ICLE Europe, a senior expert on the sustainable energy systems. Without adding anything else, I think we have Marie-Claire, so you can unmute yourself and walk us through the coping strategies and inventory and maps.
Great. Thank you, Franco. And it's actually quite useful to be following Matthias, because a lot of the things he said that they resonate really well with the findings, particularly from the coping strategies inventory and the maps. So basically, the inventory itself was a list of different ways that people are responding to decarbonization policy, and the maps mapped some of those coping strategies in the 4 regions to show what was occurring where, but also the maps show some of those socioeconomic variables that Lucas was talking about, vulnerability rates. So they're really useful as tools. But if you go to the next slide, I'll talk first about some of the more theoretical or academic insights that came out, and then a little bit about how these tools are useful. So basically, what we were able to conclude is, as Lucas mentioned, acts of resistance often, not always, but often reveal that there are unaddressed justice issues. So when people are pushing back against transitions, protesting against wind turbines, or sending in letters to the editor, to newspapers, it often means that they feel that their needs are not being addressed in some way, and they can act as signposts for policymakers or regional actors to look and say, okay, what's going on here that that we can address that would help ease transitions. Another thing that we found is that there really is a strong appetite for change in socioeconomic conditions. So people aren't looking for a new energy system where we just replace fossil fuels with remotely owned and the the same economic model of renewables. People want more voice in what happens. They want more distribution of the economic and other benefits of these industries. So fair and more inclusive societies. But what we also found is that the transitions to date and a lot of the efforts, a lot of the distribution of funds is acting to reproduce the elite power structures that people are unhappy with. So there's a need to look a bit more deeply about how can we make things more inclusive, how can we work from the bottom up to make sure there is a greater distribution of these funds and people are more included. Next slide, please. Okay, and so how are the inventory and the maps useful in this? Well, from the inventory, we also produced a series of fact sheets and guidance documents. So there's the inventory itself, but then there's these additional materials that provide guidance and advice on how you can deal with things like resistance if it comes up, but also how you can design participatory or collaborative processes, how you can work for more youth engagement in designing just transition pathways. So all sorts of different things. The maps are quite useful in figuring out or highlighting what regions are going to need more attention and in what ways, so across which different variables or socioeconomic factors. And combined, they're useful for just directing efforts into the places and the types of strategies and activities that will help to make sure that we do have a just transition and that we don't leave people behind. Thanks.
Wonderful pitch. Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. I love wandering across maps, and actually, I highly recommend that you, and maybe we can also broadcast here in the chat the link to the maps. Walking along, scouting out where you are, and here in particular, looking at the socioeconomic risk factors. Very useful for the debate, also as a tool, visual tool to get into the debate with local stakeholders. Next in line.
Just one addition. Actually, the maps made it into the last, or the recently published cohesion report of the European Commission. So they have policy impact already. Thanks.
Wonderful. So a KPI here, or an emphasis for you to look into these maps, for sure. Thank you. Then next pitch to come from Janis Beutel, Wuppertal Institute, on the JT Ready tool. It's a Just Transition Readiness Evaluation tool. We talked already about indicators and evaluation. So let's look into what Janis is presenting us here.
Yeah, thank you, Carsten, for the introduction. I'm happy to present this tool in this brief pitch. And yeah, maybe we can already start with the next slide, which gives you a short look already at the framework that we've developed. It's like we call it a little bit the transition wheel, which was designed on the left. That gives really like an overview about how we actually try to, how you can come from a just transition approach towards like really policy level making on a local and regional level. That was our focus here. And the reason why we developed that tool, it just really resonates also with what was discussed earlier, was on the one hand side, that we see still, even though, yeah, transition and especially sustainability policies are are designed for a couple of years now, and we see some impact. But when it comes to just transition policies, we really see not the progress that could be there, and there's a big risk of that, especially social policies fall behind, and it will not really deliver what is actually promised also by the European Union when they say nobody is left behind. But with current policy setups, there's a big risk still that this actually could be possible. And as we want to, and most of the regions want to make sure that nobody is left behind, that will be like really crucial for the regions and for you probably also to develop some kind of policies that can prevent that this is happening. And this is why we think, and this is the second point we raised here, is that transition approach need to be truly just. And that is also, referring to the outcomes of what Lucas presented, that it should be also the existing and potential new injustices that may happen should be taken into account, and also structural injustices in the regions that are not directly linked to an energy transition, such as like housing and employment, structural elements that just define the region as well. And based on that, we tried to develop that tool. And we called it readiness assessment tool, because it's not a tool for assessing how good you are on just transition policymaking at the moment. It is rather about how well is your region actually equipped to now start with just transition planning. And that is what this tool should deliver. And I can talk about a bit on the next slide. Just one highlight. One step back. I'm still missing point number 3. That's just one insight that I wanted to highlight here as one of the outcomes that we that we realized throughout the process of designing this tool, is that if you look at the local level and what local and regional policymakers have the authority of to do on a policy level, then spatial planning is actually a very powerful tool that is often not used so much in detail as it could be. So in terms of like how design spaces that it becomes more sustainable, but also some making provisions, for example, to require space to be to have some like social housing, to ensure that like rich and poor people are not like living so far and distance from each other. There is more mixed use. All of this kind of things could be actually done in many regions with spatial planning tools. And this was just one of the highlights that we realized here, that is really on many levels that you can see around the frame, that could be used to improve the situation of just transition readiness. And now we come to the second slide, which just briefly gives you an overview about what you can now do with this tool. So first one would be you get a relevant overview of policy areas for just transition. So which policies are actually relevant, or could be relevant if you take into account this more inclusive approach of just transition, saying also you want to tackle existing injustices. And through that, you can then also identify gaps and inconsistencies in local policy frameworks, because obviously also one big point that is important is that overall the policy framework should be consistent, and these goals should not be detrimental to each other. And in the end, and this is also what this picture shows, for every aspect, for every policy level that we identified, we also provide examples or further readings that can probably inspire you to what could be done on the local level in that regard. And with that, I'm already at my 5 minutes time, right? So I'm finishing. Thank you very much for having me, and looking forward.
It's all right, Yanis, we forgive you. No, very good. Thanks a lot for this insight. Also, like just recalling what the Matthias Ecke said before about like this centralized way of distributing the resources. So it's good that this could help the regional and local level to assess their policies, and also to help the EU also understand into what's happening there. Because if right now like the resources go into the member state level, it means that they need to go deeper into that to understand where to distribute the resources. So before we go into the next one, another reminder of the Menti, but also I saw that there is another question in the Q&A section. So you're also more than welcome to use that part of Microsoft Teams. So whatever works for you. But also talking about resources, we're going to talk about how much we need to do this phase out and what are the compensation policies that we need to put in place in order to do that. So now I'm going to introduce Lola Nake to do the third pitch. So the floor is yours, Lola.
Thanks, Franco. Yeah, so I'm going to be introducing the third flagship output, where we have looked at coal phase-out plans, not only within, but also beyond Europe. So we're going to go a bit broader now. And Franco, if you could already go to the next slide. So we have actually found that all over the world, most of the countries that plan coal phase out also have policies that financially support negatively affected actors of that coal phase out. And those are the countries that you see here on that figure. And the more ambitious the coal phase out plan of the countries is, the more financial support they tend to pledge. And what does more ambitious coal phase out mean? So it means that these countries phase out larger coal power plant fleets quicker, which is of course also better for the climate. And what does financial support to negatively affected actors means? So it means that governments pay support, for example, to the coal regions that we've already discussed, or to the workers, or also to companies, for example. And Franco, if you could advance once more. Our second key finding is that across the whole world, countries at this moment pay roughly 200 billion US dollars equivalent for such compensation. And actually more than half of this money is provided through international finance. So international finance plays quite an important role. And there are mainly two sources of this international finance. One is the EU's Just Transition Fund, which we've already heard a bit about. And the other source is the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, which are on a global level where country flows from global north countries to major coal consumers in the global south, like, for example, Indonesia and Vietnam. And Franco, if you could advance once more. And then what we have done for our third key finding is that despite all of these existing coal phase-out plans and compensation, two of the world's largest coal consumers, China and India, don't have coal phase-out plans yet. But of course, their coal phase-out would be very important to reach climate targets. So we have looked at a counterfactual, so a hypothetical scenario, to understand what amount of compensation would be required in the case that these two countries would phase out coal in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. And we have found that for these two countries, much more money would be required than is currently pledged. And per year, this would be roughly double the annual climate finance pledge of all developed countries. I don't know if you know about this, but all developed countries have pledged to pay up to $100 billion per year all over the world for climate change mitigation. So we can see that coal phase out is really a big challenge. And if you could advance again, Franco. So what can we actually learn from these insights now? Is there some hope there? Our first key learning, despite these kind of huge amounts of money that I have just mentioned, is that compensation, financial support for negatively affected actors of coal phase out does actually seem to be a very rational policy choice, because we find that it is associated with more ambitious coal phase out, which we want for climate change mitigation, and also per ton of avoided emissions of the coal phase out, the cost is actually comparable to already existing policies, like the cost is comparable to carbon prices under the EU emissions trading scheme. So it seems like a rational policy choice. Our second learning, which is very much connected to what Matthias has said, and also what the previous flagship outputs have said, and Franco, is that good governance is really crucial. So of course, it doesn't only matter that we have the money, but then it also matters how is this actually implemented, how is this distributed, and then maybe some of the previous tools that we've seen can help in facilitating this and connecting to this learning as well. And then our third learning also, I think, very much connects to what Matthias has said, namely that with this case of coal phase out, we can really see that accounting for the locally borne costs of climate change mitigation can actually help us have more ambitious transitions. So we believe that this is not only the case for coal phase out. I mean, we see kind of local resistance to wind power as well, for example. So we really see that despite these big global benefits of climate change mitigation, the costs are often borne locally and in regions. So really accounting for these costs can really help enable more ambitious transitions. So thanks very much, and I hope these learnings can be useful for some of you.
Thank you very much, Lola, for broadening the picture from Europe towards the global field, but also to be proud then, if I understood correctly, that actually the European ambition for the coal phase out and its triggering has actually an impact globally and is injecting that run towards climate neutrality and justice at the same time. So having said that, I'm now happy to present our colleague, George Stiff, part of the Sustainable Energy Systems team. We at ICLEI, we were part of this consortium tasked to translate and bridge science with the practitioners. And in this regard, we have identified 4 key principles, which George is now presenting. Over to you.
Thank you, Karsten. Yeah, so the document will, Patrick, I see you recognize the picture. This is from Katowice in the center of town. So we see this is a very interesting case of just transition right in an urban center. But what we have in this document, you'll get the link for that soon, is, let's say, mottos, if you will, for how a just transition could be created. My colleague Arthur Hensch and I, we did this together. So if you can go to the next slide. There are 4 key findings that we would highlight. The first is kind of mimicking already what Lucas already said, that we need to transform injustices into justices. And this is also mimicking what Marie-Claire said, that you have to look for the roots of resistance, and it can be found in these kinds of injustices. And there's also lock-in of existing infrastructure. There's lock-in in terms of relationships that policymakers might have with energy companies, or the workers have with their energy companies, the communities have with these companies. So there's all kinds of lock-in that exists. And what we have to do, if you go and continue, is you have to build up transparent communication. So you need to overcome doubt and disinformation. There is propaganda out there, particularly from populists that are exploiting this, which is looking at somewhat perceived concerns and injustices. There are some legitimate ones there as well, but they're exploiting it. So you have to use transparency to overcome this. You also use meaningful collaboration. This will help build up trust. If people see that you are righting wrongs, then they'll not only believe you, then they'll start to see this watershed moment that Lucas referred to. They will start to see if they have to adapt. And some of them will even come in and start contributing to the transformation as well. They will shift themselves to a new business, or they will say, you know what, we want to stay in energy region, let's shift to green energy. So we can go to the next one. The next principle is about together we thrive. So this is all about engagement. It's found that it's very difficult to engage if you rely only on overly abstract concepts. So this means that it comes back to the idea of what is just transition? How can you define that? A miner is going to see it differently than the wife, than the mayor in that town, than an NGO in the capital, than a policymaker in Brussels. They're all going to have different ideas of what a just transition is. So maybe don't rely on just transition. Talk instead about concrete things. So you can go to the next. So focus on concrete concerns. Talk about health, talk about job security, talk about what are their prospects for their children. Go beyond economic things. If you want young people to get involved, don't just talk about them. Don't have too many meetings talking about young people or women or vulnerable groups. Invite them to your meetings, talk with them. But don't expect young people to necessarily care about your procedures, but do give them a chance to decide on what their own future is going to be, and give them a chance to want to stay in the region. You also want to bring in formal groups. Don't rely only on NGOs, but bring in some that maybe don't have a formal spokesperson. And make sure that everything that you do has equal opportunities for women, especially, and decision making, but also has larger benefits for all of these groups. Next slide. So then maybe some from the Estonians will recognize this one as an Ida-Virumaa, this picture. So you have to attract and retain your talent. There's a lot of regions are looking to have a bit of a narrow focus in terms of investments and skill development. So we might look at the example of Virama, where they have this rare earth magnet factory, which has been started. But this was actually building on 10 years worth of work that their agency has been doing, as well as national level headhunting to find companies that are available to come to the region. So next. So what you have to do is you also have to not rely only on angel investors, but support your local SMEs, the ones that already exist, and help startups to innovate. This might mean that local authorities have to shift their priorities from the big investments to not try to land the big fish only, but to help those who are there. This is something that, for example, Rybnik in Silesia is trying to learn, that they're going to have to support the local. You also have to have the infrastructure and the services available, which are making it attractive. That if you don't have the logistics and travel options, then people are not going to come. Businesses are not going to come. You have to have the healthcare. So Matthias mentioned healthcare facilities that might normally be funded anyway, but make sure that they are funded, because you're not going to get workers to come if you don't have healthcare, childcare, education systems, if you don't have nature or leisure activities. One of my favorite moments from our webinar series was a very insightful point made that young people don't want only education and jobs. So if you have education and jobs in these regions, that's good. But they can go to the capital and get culture. They can go abroad and get culture. So make sure that you have culture. Don't neglect these things. And you have to develop skills across the community, not just for the miners, but for their families, for their children, for other people in the community. Next. I'm aware of the time, but I'll finish up very briefly here. For governance aspects, coal commissions have been successful in some regards. They've overcome stalemates and compromise, for example, in Germany, but also in Germany's case, there are power imbalances, and it's not in line with the Paris Agreement. So coal commissions have their uses in certain phases, but don't rely on them. What we need, if you go to the next, is we need true political leadership to be in place. And this means that the managing authorities need to really take ownership, but they also have to have participatory processes. They have to have monitoring that's there. Expert commissions can be a way to ensure neutrality. So but they should also have more locals. So it's not just bureaucrats and researchers and NGOs from the capital, but make sure that you have NGOs in the regions. And stronger monitoring needs to be set in place. Many regions are still struggling with this. There are some committees, but maybe they have too many bureaucrats. Maybe they have too many from the capital that are involved in this. So again, more locals. They need stronger indicators. We've heard about this. He mentioned Matthias Ecke about policy, cohesion policy. So maybe let's pull in from the cohesion policy as well. So that would be my not quite 5-minute pitch. But on a separate moment, I will point out that this webinar, again, is part of a 10-webinar series. So if you haven't checked out the other webinars, please do so. We have lots of interesting ones. There's ones on gender. There's ones on youth, energy communities. There's lots of interesting topics that have already been discussed. Feel free to look at those recordings and the slides. That's it for me.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, George, for this. All this straightforward pieces of advices in a way that, and also together with some examples of some regions that have been already been implementing the territorial just transition plan, and also to highlight again the events, which, yes, you can all find in the CINTRAN.eu website together with the recording of this one. But now, sorry, this is to show that it's working. Yeah. So now we have the Q&A. So another reminder to either go into the Menti or use the Q&A section that we have here. So I think I see that there was already one question. So if you want, Carsten, we can either like to also ask other questions while we wait for the audience to bring more, or we can just kick out that.
Okay, so maybe one question that that was triggered by Matthias' intervention here is directed to Marie-Claire. Matthias was talking about huge infrastructure investments, and you talked about the danger, the risk that existing potentially unbalanced power structure are repeated, will potentially continue with this type of investment. So how can we respond to that with the new just transition mechanism, or shaping the just transition mechanism in the way that it responds to exactly that issue?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we are going to need big infrastructure investment in addition to anything else. But some of the ways to address this are to focus on the process of how you go about making those decisions and rolling out the funds, and not just on the outcome. So you want to have processes where people are invited to talk about what's important to them, to talk about how they want to see the money spent. So maybe they'll be fine with sort of this more conventional, traditional model where the government will work with sort of a big energy company, and they'll develop a plant, or they'll put in installations, or maybe they want to see models that have part community ownership, that have impact benefit agreements. Maybe they'll want to see that some of the revenues from those plants go into a fund for local education development, or development of things like childcare funds. So there are lots. What we're seeing is that, yeah, people want an opportunity to be able to do things differently. So it also means like not just setting up processes, but actually listening to people. So having a clear mechanism for how those inputs, when people donate their time, because it's a resource, this time from the public, when they put effort in, how will that be translated into policy discussions, and what are the criteria that decision makers are using? Because not everything will be reasonable or possible for policymakers to take on, but a clear, transparent process. And the other key point is that if you do these things like run participatory processes, or consultation or collaborative processes, and you don't listen to people, then you can make things worse. So you can break trust, and you can create more resistance in the regions that you're trying to address. So it's a process. It's balancing this need for speed, essentially, with the transition, with the fact that if we don't take the time to do it properly, then we're not going to get to the end point anyways.
Balancing the need for speed. This is a very good motto, and I fully agree. I heard processes where actually trust was broken because stakeholders were not taken on board, or were taken on board, and then the outcome was unclear, and investments were done without further consultation, or better, even involvement. Lucas, you have your hand up, potentially would like to react towards what Marie-Claire said, as well as what Matthias also mentioned.
Yeah, so Matthias was saying that there's this perception, maybe reality, that funds get captured by some powerful actors. I would add to that in part it's built in the way the public funding is spent, because it's all focusing on projects. And a project by design has a start and an end and a defined budget, and you need to write a project proposal, and someone needs to approve that proposal, and then you need to evaluate the project. So there's a very specific way of doing things, and not everything can conform to a project, and not everyone is in the same way able to propose a project. So what we see is that a lot of projects go to actors who are good at writing project proposals, who have a lot of experience with that. And in our work, we've come to see this like well, a lot of people seem to see Just Transition as a an engineering problem, essentially a problem solving exercise. We have a problem, we need to come up with a design to solve it. And in our exchanges with the people in the region, we found that it's actually wrong to see it that way. It's more of a care problem, right? We have to invest time, and there is not a finished problem. It will change over time. And again, coming back to this question of projects, a lot of the things that we speak about care, like caring for people, raising children, caring for elderly people, it does not conform to a project size. There is no end to caring, right? So these projects are kind of by definition excluded because they're not, you can't fit them in the project. And Matthias said that we're spending a lot of money into concrete, right? We're building new kindergartens, but funding permanently a new kindergartner and the staff working there and in the health centers, it's not a project. So it cannot be funded by the Just Transition mechanism. So I think that's also a problem that's in a sense built in. I don't have a solution how to overcome it because this kind of projectism paradigm is really hard to break, and there are not really clear alternatives, at least not for me. But just to raise this as another insight from our work with the stakeholders particularly.
Excellent, and thanks, Lucas. And I think, sorry, I raised my hand, but I agree with you with this way of distributing, in a way, the funds. Also, like it's like one of the bureaucratic challenges that most of the regions have, because they need this capacity to do that basically, and to get to know how to get informed about these funds, and then also writing the application and so on. And I have a follow-up question with you, for you, sorry, about that. And so we said before that CINTRAN has been doing a good work in connecting science to policy making. But if you could go back to the past and have a meeting with yourself before starting CINTRAN, what recommendations will you give to yourself to strengthen this connection? And I think this is also could be useful for either practitioners, but also other people that are maybe from other CINTRAN, let's say, twin projects, and also for us in a way. How can we communicate these insights?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think when we were developing this project proposal, Carsten and I have been discussing this idea of the capacity building program, and I was like, yeah, I don't know what to expect from it. It's fine, let them do it. But I was not really enthusiastic about it, and that has really changed, I think. And one lesson that I took away from is that when you design these kind of transdisciplinary stakeholder processes where you work with basically your target audience, or with the people who supposedly should use your research. I'm talking as a researcher now, right? Very often the idea is that we invite stakeholders to solve our problems as researchers, to help us identify, yeah, right. And what I found really good in these capacity building programs and transition academies that we had, that they were designed to engage stakeholders to talk to each other about their programs, and we were more listening and maybe contributing some insights into those discussions from our research, but it was not our problems that were discussed. But it was so useful for me to learn, to hear to fine-tune my research and basically take turns to make sure it fits to what those people were talking about as their genuine problems. I think this idea of designing stakeholder workshops to have stakeholders talk to each other and then listen and respond to that, instead of asking the questions and expecting people to provide the answers. That is something that I learned, which worked very well, and I've already used it to design the next research project in that way as well. Let's hope it gets funded. It's still out.
Wonderful
Okay.
feedback. Thank you, Lucas. It also links very much to the question here asked in the Q&A, and I'm encouraging you to post your questions here. From Emilia from Bitula. She says, and I may direct this question here to Yannis, as you were referring to the JT Ready tool, and if I'm not mistaken, you've actually already spoken with stakeholders, guided stakeholders about it. So Emilia's question is, has this scientific approach, and here maybe you refer to this tool, in the process of the Just Transition proven to be useful, and how much has it guided already practical implications, practical processes? Thank you.
So we had a workshop in Czechia a few weeks ago in Prague, where we basically a little bit tested the tool, where maybe someone of this round was also there, where we basically just did a very rough assessments just to try to get this overview that I was talking about, saying like, okay, what kind of areas do you think are like already addressed and which are not? And we did like a little bit with the traffic light system to just really trying to, like on this big posters with the wheels, seeing like which areas are covered and which are not, and which areas we could probably improve. So that was like a very very practical application of that tool, but only within like a workshop of 1 hour. And of course, that would be very cool to apply this tool also for strategy development, and especially also interlinked to the Just Transition mechanism from the European Union, because there you, on the one hand side, you have to have these like TGTPs, but you also probably need to have an additional regional local strategy that that embraces this TGTPs, but also actually goes a bit broader. And I think that would be great use for that tool. But to answer the question, we have not done it yet. But I hope that this could be inspiring for some to start that and use the tool in that way. And if you're willing to do so, please also get in touch, and we can also discuss any questions or other issues that might come up if you want to apply the tool.
Excellent. Great to hear, Yanis, that the tool is already being applied. I think maybe a follow-up question will be like, how will that change the tool in a way, or which effects will have? But now I think also checking the Menti, I think there is one question that could be redirected to Lola somehow, because you talk about the insights that also were beyond the EU. And acknowledging that one of the crises that we are facing is planetary rather than just European. So given the enormous financial investment that you said, sometimes it's even twice of what they have been pledged that we need to make at the global level to achieve this transition, what would you advise to the EU policymakers to meet the pledges of the Paris Agreement? And also I wanted to share quickly the connection to the Menti question, which is like, what are the strategies to convince policymakers that they must invest not only into monster projects, but also like more specific projects that go into the local level? So yes, Lola, if you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for redirecting the question, Franco. I mean, I think it's always kind of tricky to base policy recommendations purely on research insights. I mean, I think I will draw here not only on the research that I've done of policy documents, but also of the insights I've gained through kind of the stakeholder dialogues, like Lucas mentioned, that were part of the CINTRAN project, and that were for me also super insightful. I mean, I think, and I feel like I cannot add so much. I feel like I can mainly echo what we have already said. I just think that dialogue and really listening to each other is really, really crucial. I mean, I think we have these different levels of the national and of the subnational, and this may be even trickier in countries that are outside of Europe, because here we have relatively small countries mostly. But if we talk about a country like China or like India, right, which is massive, then there's even greater disparities between when we talk at a national and a regional level. So I think that this is really, really just important for people at different levels to exchange and to talk to each other. What are the real challenges? And I think maybe one one suggestion, and this can maybe also be a strategy. I think that was mentioned in the Menti, kind of what are strategies to convince policymakers? I mean, I think a strategy is really to try to talk to each other. Yeah, I think as advice for European policymakers, maybe if trying to think beyond a 4-term election period, trying to think a bit beyond kind of the project focus that Lucas also mentioned, but trying to think a bit more long term. I mean, of course, we understand that for policymakers, becoming re-elected is something important, right? So you also want something that you can write something big and say, hey, I did this amazing Just Transition Fund. Or I had these amazing stakeholder dialogues, but think a bit further beyond that, and how can these be implemented over time and really the benefits reaped over time. So yeah, with that, I hope that feels a bit satisfying advice.
Very good, Lola. Thank you making this point, and this links also to what George presented about one of these principles to make communication happen in a transparent way, trust-building way. It also potentially links, George, if I may, also to Jeremy's question. You may complement here with your answer as well. Do you think that the research that we have done and you have also gathered here in this abstract of the 4 key principles, distilling that these outcomes and policy recommendations could be applied also to other carbon-intensive regions, other sectors, other aspects? So maybe broadening the picture here, how applicable are the 4 principles? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I think that this has been my major finding in working on coal transition, just transition these past years, is the commonalities that you can find. And I think that when you talk to practitioners, for example, in these academy events that Lucas was talking about, you find so much time and time again that it doesn't matter what the thing that's being mined is. It doesn't matter what the industry is. The major concerns are the same. There's job uncertainty, there's economic uncertainty, there's brain drain, there is poor education, there's poor infrastructure, there's a feeling of neglect. These are all commonalities, and the governance needs to be strengthened. So having proper monitoring that touches on these different aspects. It doesn't really matter what the fuel is. I think that you just have to do things right. And as Lola was talking about the election cycles, I think this is also really important from a governance perspective as well, that because you know that elections can happen. In some countries, they happen even more frequently than they're supposed to be happening. So you need to make sure that whatever the pathway that is being done is something that's going to continue even further, even if the mayor changes or the higher up government changes. So you need to have some strategies. You need to have some funds that are resilient to political winds. So I think that's really important. The other thing I was going to highlight is the idea of the dialogue. This is, I think, crucial. We have a really nice case, I find, in Iroviruma, where they developed a climate assembly from young people, and they also add the young people to talk about what are the projects that they want to have. They were able to take part in the decision-making process. So I think this is a really nice model to look into. You have poor examples, I won't name and shame, but a decision about district heating decarbonization going to be happening, and people are not happy about the price increases. And to some degree, it's because they were not included in the decision-making process. So they feel that they're having something imposed on them from the capital or from Brussels. So this is something that you need to overcome. And the idea of the cultural aspects, even if they cannot be funded by JTF, as Lucas mentioned, find some other funding. Use JTF for whatever it is that you can and is eligible, but make sure that you have the other things. An example in Slovakia comes to my mind. In Upper Nitra, they developed a program that included mental health for people that have lost their jobs, job-seeking assistance, not just skills in job-related skills, but also you should develop skills in arts and things like that, because you want to be able to show people that these are regions not just to learn and to work in, but it's a nice place to live. And for that, you need to have culture.
Excellent. Thanks a lot again, George. As always, like straightforward advice to practitioners. And I know, Marie Claire, you have your hand raised, but we are reaching the end of the webinar. But in any case, I'm going to give you the floor. But so all the speakers will have like 1 minute to say a last minute reaction, thoughts. It can be the main takeaway from this webinar or from the whole CINTRAN project and so on. So you can go first, Marie Claire.
No, I'm going to end up using mine though to address this question of convincing policymakers, and basically, sort of the next phase in decarbonization, particularly in Europe, is dealing with this wave of pushback and resistance. So we're seeing a moves away from the project of decarbonization, a loss of consensus, and so I don't think that there is a big policy maker out there who's not in the luxurious position of being able to just push forward with business as usual. We need to be figuring out how to do things differently. So I think framing things to politicians or to decision makers in that way, that you can't just use this business as usual model of large scale investment. You need to look at other ways to do things, is really important. And and there's lots of stuff from the coping strategies inventory and the outputs and the maps there that can help with that. And that's how I'll tie it back to my work.
Great, thanks, Marie Claire. Then over to Yannis, your main takeaway here in this endeavor of 4 years of legacy of CINTRAN.
Yeah, I think for me, it really turns down to that for like, as just transition is such a term that is used so widely and everybody can kind of accept it and say, yeah, that's good, like we need to have it. But it's really, really important to to define your own idea and to see what this actually should mean for your own region and how to concretely put that into a development concept and into goals that work for you. There's no real blueprint, but I mean, there is like lots of guidance as we have also developed, but also others in this field. And I think this is that, but it's really, really crucial to to be kind of goal driven and set that ambition in strategies and work from that forward on.
Excellent. Now over to Lola.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, maybe my main overarching insight from the whole project, which I think was also mirrored today, was that I think really having a multitude of kind of information sources is really important. And I think it also mirrors again this importance of dialogue, because for me, I looked at kind of national level data, I looked at policy documents, but then all this information became so much richer by talking to people and also by hearing the insights from the other CINTRAN insights. So yeah, I just am really happy to have been part of this project, and I hope we can continue this journey of gathering information from different parts and in different ways and then bringing it all together in the end.
George.
So I think my major takeaway would be a message to people in the regions of like 4 words. I counted them. You are not alone. So this has 2 meanings for me. One, the people in the regions who are seeing some injustice or feeling some injustice against them. There are others in the region who are feeling this. So come together and make sure that people and decision makers know about your injustice and know how to address it. And at the same time, those that are decision makers, those that are trying to lead the transition, you are not alone. You can look to other regions. As I mentioned, to a large degree, it doesn't matter whether you have lignite or peat or underground hard coal or oil shale. It doesn't really matter, but you can learn from other regions. So definitely seek out others and learn from them.
Great, and CINTRAN might be over, but the Just Transition is not. So it's a goodbye for now.